It wasn't that he was accommodating me and helping me to be a better person. No, he adapted to what I was willing to give him, which was I'm not willing to give you my full attention unless you tell me it's an emergency.
This is the Military Sherpa Podcast. Left, right, left leadership insights from America's best. With your Military Sherpa, Mark Tilsher.
Welcome back to the Military Sherpa Podcast. I am your host, Mark, and I am so excited to be back in the seat with you, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. I hope that today is an amazing day. There's so much to be grateful for, even with all the craziness that's happening in the world. It's just nice to be here and talking about leadership and culture and what we can do to make the lives of people around us better. Before we do anything, I do want to tell you, I have finally finished writing my book, and it looks like The Leader's Garden, A Guide to Growing Healthy, High-Performing People, is going to be releasing May 1st. And you can personally get a free copy and get your name in the acknowledgement section of the book if you join my book launch team. My book launch team is going to be doing cool things like helping me to pick the cover, participating in some cool contests to help us market, potentially winning some $100 Amazon gift cards and different things like that. All you've got to do to join my book launch team is go to book.marktilsher.com. That's book.marktilsher.com, MarkTilsher, book.marktilsher.com. Now, as we get into this week's podcast episode, putting that behind us, we're going to be talking about how to level up. And I'm kicking around the idea of doing a series on leveling up. And basically, if we think about a video game, regardless of what game you play, leveling up always has this image or this idea that you're going to be able to take on bigger and badder bad guys. That you're going to be able to wear cooler armor, have cooler weapons, whether we're talking about guns or swords or whatever it is. Leveling up is always exciting. It comes with new challenges, but it means that the things that used to be difficult are a lot less difficult. If we're thinking about team games, when you level up, you become more valuable to your team. You can take on bigger mobs. You can go on bigger raids. You can go into bigger dungeons. Look at me nerding out. But it's like a video game. And this week, I want to give you something, and I'm going to try to do it in like 5 minutes or less. Something that you can implement this week that will change, that will level you up and make it easier to deal with problems that you used to encounter and make it easier for you to deal with potential problems that you'll see in the future. So this week, we're going to do a skill, and regardless of your class, right? You can be a fighter or a mage, whatever. This skill it's universal across all classes. And we're going to use a term. It comes from the book 5 Gears, but it's called triggers. And what triggers are, if we look at the definition in triggers are just something that causes an event or a situation to happen or to exist. The trigger that we think of most often is like the trigger on a firearm. You take a firearm, you squeeze the trigger. What happens? A projectile fires out of the end. A loud noise, a flash, a bang, and a projectile comes flying out. But there's other triggers. Think about like a bear trap. You push down on the bear trap, boom, it triggers the trap to close. There are a lot of different triggers that we encounter in our life. The ones I think of the most are the ones that deal with war, the ones that deal with explosions. But there's more. Like if your wife says, do I look fat in this dress? And you say, well, yeah, that trigger is going to trigger an explosion of a different kind. And so there are all kinds of triggers, things that happen. But we're going to talk about how we use triggers to level up our leadership. And it doesn't matter if we're in a position of power. We don't have to be positionally in charge to lead. We lead up, we lead down, we lead laterally. But we need to know about triggers. And there are a host of ways that we can improve the way that people experience us, right? We look at our core, our IQ, EQ, PQ, right? Our PQ, personality quotient. Do we know what it's like to be on the other side of us? And there are ways that we can start to see that and improve the way that people experience us. And think about problems that bother you. Hey, does it bother you when other people are late? Does it bother you when you go into somebody's office and people are typing? Does it bother you when somebody doesn't remember your birthday? If we look at the leadership model of become, build, lead, then it means that when it comes to these things, not only can we do them, we have to be able to do them, right? We should be on time. We should not be typing at our computer when people come into our office to talk to us. We shouldn't be forgetting people's birthdays, right? All of these things are all things that we should or shouldn't be doing. But become, build, lead, becoming a leader worth following means we can do them ourselves. Building leaders worth following means we can teach our subordinates, our sub-leaders, to do them as well in the same way that we did. So we're not the best leader they ever worked for because they like us or because we care, but because we leveled them up. And then leading organizations everyone wants to work for means institutionalizing these things across our organization, meaning it becomes normal inside of our culture. And so let's just focus on 2 different things really quickly that we can do with triggers. And then I'm going to give you an invite. I want you to be able to email me and tell me how you would use triggers, because there's a lot of things I wouldn't think of. And then I can consolidate those and put out an episode with all kinds of tips. But first, think about people typing. Does it ever bother you when people come in or you go into somebody else's office and they're like, oh, yeah, hey, just a minute, and they type? Or worse, you talk to them and they keep typing? I used to have a guy who worked for me. His last name was Baker. I won't say his first name just because I don't want to identify him. Some of you might know him. Phenomenal. He was my number two when I was a commandant for a little while. Just an outstanding non-commissioned officer, senior non-commissioned officer now, who's going to be a chief someday, probably be running his career field. He's such a great guy. And I remember that he would come into my office and he would compare me to an octopus. And at the time, I thought it was actually kind of cool. Like, he knew me so well, he knew how to adapt to me. And he would come into my office and he'd be like, hey, I need 2 tentacles right now. And what he meant by that was that I could literally just keep doing what I was doing. I could keep typing. I could keep singing. I keep, eating candy, whatever it was, right? I only need 2 tentacles. And then sometimes he would walk in and be like, hey, I need 8 tentacles. And I'd be like, oh man, that's huge. So I had to get away from my desk and sit down at my chair or at my conference table and actually work through whatever it is that he needed to talk about. But he had adapted to my inability to give him my attention. That's what had actually happened. It wasn't that he was accommodating me and helping me to be a better person. No, he adapted to what I was willing to give him, which was, I'm not willing to give you my full attention unless you tell me it's an emergency. And that carries on, not just at work, that carries on to at home as well. The number of times that my family feels like, well, now's not a good time to talk to dad. It's horrible. I've given people this idea around me. This is a huge negative tendency of mine. And if you hate it, guess what? Everyone else does too. They hate it. And you might not do it. And what you might do is you might tell people, well, hey, look, when people come in your office, you need to stop typing and you need to talk to them. And that's not a bad piece of advice. But a better way is to use a trigger. And here's how triggers work. Someone's coming into your office at 10 a.m. You set a reminder for 5 minutes before the meeting that tell you to move away from your desk. And that way, you move away from your desk, you sit at your conference table, you sit at the couch, you just move your chair away from your computer, you get your notebook, you write down a few things to prepare yourself for the meeting. And then when they walk in, you're not at your computer telling them to hold on for a second. Instead, you're ready for them. You're sitting on the couch, sitting in your chair, whatever it is, they're the center of the universe. They're 2 very different signals that get sent. The first one is, hey, I'm a very important person. I got to work until the last possible second. And when you walk in, I'm so important that I'm going to finish what I'm doing before I acknowledge that you're here and give you my attention. The second signal is, you're so important that I stopped everything that I was doing to prepare for you, and I'm actually waiting for you. What a difference that makes. There are 2 different signals. One is that, hey, I know that you're here. Thanks for coming. Wait for me. The other one is, I'm so excited you're here. I've been waiting for you. What signal do you want people around you to get? It's easy. Just set a trigger and go for it. That email you need to type will still be there. It'll still be there in an hour. If it is truly an emergency, then you need to let the person know, hey, I can't take that meeting. I can't do this. I'm so sorry. Cancel it. But don't let people come into your office and you're still working, making them wait for you. That's horrible. The same thing is true when we go home. Way too many of us go home. We have families, we have kids, we have wives, we have dogs. We go home and we're not finished with our work. We get home, we're on the phone until the last second. We're typing, we're texting, we're in the parking lot, still texting, doing what we have to do. I'm guilty of walking in the house. I did it literally today. I walked into the house after being gone for 3 hours. I even had flowers from my wife in my hand. And I was on a business call. And so I handed her flowers while I was on the business call. I should have stayed in the car. Why did I come inside at all? What was wrong with me? I didn't use triggers. And so what triggers say is that, hey, when we're going home 2 miles away from the house, 3 miles away from the house, find a landmark. Maybe it's a tree, maybe it's a gas station. That when you get to that landmark, you either hang up the phone, you put down the texting, which you shouldn't be doing while you're driving anyway, and then you start to mentally prepare. Turn off your music or put on your theme song, right, for your family. Like, I have a theme song that I play every single time I teach, before any seminar. Every morning when I wake up to teach, I play the same song, and it's Paid My Dues by NF. It just gets me pumped up, something about that song for whatever reason. Play the same song before you get home. Start thinking about how excited you are to see your family. What do you want to talk to them about? What stories do you want to share? And then when you get home, you're ready for them. Your attitude is dramatically different. Nobody wants their parent or their husband, their spouse, to get home and still be on the phone and be like, hey, 1 second, guys, hold on, just wait for me. we've got to learn to use triggers, to implement them in our life. Not only for our sake, we have to learn to use triggers because it's proactive. You can articulate it and therefore you can share it. If you can use these triggers, you can teach someone, hey, you ever notice that I'm waiting for you every time you come in my office? Yeah, why? Well, I set a 5-minute timer before every meeting. I put 2 appointments. Anytime there's an appointment on my calendar, my secretary puts 2, 1 for you, 1 for me to stop working. And I always get away from my desk and I'm ready for you. You want your people to feel important, do the same thing for them. You do it and then you teach them to do it. Then you get to stand up at commander's call or you get to stand up at your Friday meetings and say, hey, everyone, just know we don't type while people are in our offices waiting for us. That's not something we do here because we're different, not my people. And we can start to institutionalize that across the organization so people know what right looks like. And so these are just 2 ideas of how you can use triggers. Think about anything that you struggle with and then start to think of what can you do, what trigger, what landmark, physically or otherwise, can you use to start to change patterns in a way that you can articulate to others. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to message me with your ideas. And here's where you message me, mark@marktilscher.com. mark@marktilscher.com. And I'm going to start a chat in our military Sherpa group. And so if you go to net.militarisherpa.com, there'll be a discussion on triggers. So hopefully we'll see you there. You definitely are missing out if you're not in our community. Hope this podcast episode was helpful. Let me know if you want me to continue the Level Up series. I really enjoyed this episode. I like the small snippets of giving you hard-hitting things that you can put into practice immediately. Let me know if this spoke to you. Mark@marktilscher.com. Can't wait to talk to you next week. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you soon.